The Red Bull Ring has held the Austrian Grand Prix more than 30 times and has had several iterations over the years. However, it's not all been smooth sailing. At one point not too long ago, it was a circuit that was completely abandoned and showed no signs of having motorsport return to it. However, it's now come back and is a highlight for the sport. So what's the history then of the Austrian GP and the Red Bull Ring? Well, what we're going to do in this video is dive into the history from 1970 all the way to 2022. Originally replaced to build the Zeltweg airfield circuit, the then named Österreich Ring was built in the spectacular Styrian Mountains, just 2 kilometers away from where the Zeltweg airfield circuit was actually based. This new circuit, spanning just under 6 kilometers, was all about power, with lots of long sweeping corners followed by relatively long straights as well. Second gear was pretty much never used, and while grip was still a factor, the power simply outweighed all of the cars with slightly better handling. For example, the 1970 Austrian GP saw the flat 12 Ferrari 312B monsters take a 1-2 victory driven by Jackie Ickx and Clay Regazzoni, who both finished over a minute ahead of third place. Now, after this dominance from 1970 by Ferrari, there was never a clear dominance from teams. However, a Ford power unit did take 8 consecutive wins all the way from 1972 to 1979. With the cars becoming ever faster as the years progressed, one of the more talked about Austrian GPs was the one held in 1975. This particular Austrian GP in 1975 certainly had its ups and downs. The race itself was only actually held at half distance due to the trench terrain and the incidents that occurred, and as a result only half of the points up for grabs were actually offered. Unfortunately, though, before the race, in a practice session, American F1 driver Mark Donohue suffered a tyre failure going into turn 1 and had a monumental crash. Now, turn 1 at the time was actually one of the fastest corners on the circuit, and not helped with the lack of barriers, Mark unfortunately died in hospital 2 days after the incident, along with a marshal who also died in the incident as well. Now, this signalled the start of the very first change that would be given to the Austrian GP, in the form of turn 1 being made slightly tighter rather than being that long fast sweeper that it used to be. However, they went even further, and in 1977 they made the 3-corner chicane as opposed to the fast sweeper, which then meant the fastest corner on the circuit became the slowest. Now, naturally, this did help the cars in becoming a lot slower. You simply can't go through a chicane as fast as you can go through a fast sweeping right-hander. However, safety was still a concern at the Austrian GP. With the new layout in place in the form of the new chicane, it was time for one of the most talked about and one of the most popular eras of Formula 1, and that is the infamous turbocharged era. 1,400 brake horsepower monsters would take to the circuit, and they would also bring with it a new meaning of the word fast. Even with the new chicane in place, these cars were only lapping 4 seconds off of the pace of what they were doing previously about 3 or 4 years ago. The 1977 Austrian GP was certainly another one that was talked about quite a lot, with James Hunt unfortunately having a mechanical failure 10 laps before the end, which allowed Alan Jones to take his first ever victory in Formula 1. Now, this did take everyone by surprise, including none other than the organisers themselves. So much so that they didn't actually have an Australian national anthem to hand, so they couldn't play it at the podium ceremony. So instead, they played an iteration of Happy Birthday, of which it was not Alan Jones's birthday either. So certainly a podium ceremony that not many people are going to forget. In the early turbo era, Shadow, Lotus and Williams all took their fair share of the spotlight, with no team having back-to-back victories until McLaren in 1984, 1985 and then 1986. Niki Lauda took the win in 1984, with Alain Prost taking the win in 1985 and 1986. Niki Lauda also became the only Austrian to win at his home Grand Prix in 1984. After losing 4th gear, he still managed to hold off Piquet and took the win. This was also the year that Niki Lauda won the championship, beating his teammate Alain Prost by just half a point. With the cars becoming even faster, and in qualifying trim they were managing 1:26 26s, the track with its lack of safety barriers and unusually narrow track sections, the original layout of the Österreich Ring held its final Grand Prix in 1987, won by Nigel Mansell in the Honda-powered Williams. and after the 1986 Austrian Grand Prix, it wouldn't return to the F1 calendar for an entire decade. Fast forward 10 years, and in 1996, the track saw a massive redesign by Hermann Tilke, and it made its way back onto the calendar in 1997. With the turbo era of Formula 1 cars a thing of the past, the circuit saw home to much more modern machinery, including the McLaren MP4-12 and the Ferrari F310. The new circuit was built on the same land that the Österreich Ring was held on and built on, and it actually kept a couple of the corners from the infield section as well. A name change also came about from the Österreich Ring to the A1 Ring, and that was simply because the mobile phone company A1 funded the bulk of the cash for the redesign to take place. We can see several changes in the layout, most notably of which is how much shorter the track became, going from 5.9 kilometers down to 4.3. More safety enhancements were added to the track as well, including much bigger runoffs in the event of someone spinning or having an incident. Turns 1, 2 and 3 also became a lot slower and a lot tighter, allowing for bigger braking zones and ultimately more overtaking. The bigger braking zones helped racing in general, with the faster sweepers replaced by these tight corners. The bigger braking zones allowed more overtaking opportunities to happen, which ensured consistent racing and exciting racing for the fans. However, the A1 Ring saw a much shorter run in its stint of F1, with only 6 races being held consecutively from 1997 to 2003. After 2003, the A1 Ring certainly took a little bit of a downturn that no one thought it was ever going to recover from. With the circuit in tatters from 2004, McLaren and Ferrari were the two most successful teams in this period, taking 3 wins apiece. After 2003, the F1 grandstands and the pits were all demolished, and all motorsport left the Styrian Mountains, for what some would have been thought for good. With the track becoming overgrown, it was clear to more and more people that if there was ever going to be another Austrian Grand Prix, it wouldn't be held at the A1 Ring. With the circuit in tatters as the years went on, there were several discussions across varying different companies and individuals talking about taking the circuit on board, renovating it, and then putting it back into motorsport. However, none of these talks actually came to fruition. Red Bull, KTM and VW all had initial talks with one another, but at the last minute VW pulled out, leaving everyone back to square one. However, in 2008, Red Bull started construction of the circuit, which cost them around 70 million euros, and with this reconstruction also came a new name, the Red Bull Ring. And the newly renovated circuit held its first motorsport event in 2011. F1 saw a return to the Austrian GP in 2014 after initial talks were actually postponed about the Grand Prix of America a few years prior. Since 2014, the Austrian Grand Prix has been on the calendar every year ever since, with it even taking a double header at the start of the 2020 season after Formula 1 started to get around the issues of the COVID pandemic. There has been some fantastic racing at the Red Bull Ring over the years, and hopefully it will continue for years to come. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you would like to see me talk about any more history of F1 circuits, please do let me know in the comments below. And also let me know, what is your favourite circuit? Thank you everyone for watching, and as always, take care, stay safe.